very good mid-morning to everybody. I'm needing that clicker. Either, Jeremy, you have it? Thank you so much.
No problem.
The RFA, 1975 to now, and I'm allowed to walk in front of the screen because you can see there's no shadow. That's technology for you. It's lovely, isn't it? Helping members to remain sustainable, competitive, developmental, and to grow. I think that's what all of you are thinking about. And all the other speakers have literally built up the scenario to a point where you are now very capable to consider, what do you do? Very powerful words on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. Unleashing the power that you have with your BBBEE spend. I would suspect, in a very prejudiced way, that this would be on the back burner of most people's minds, especially CEOs, CFOs. Oh, by the way, you won't find those three abbreviations on the ballot paper. There are positions in corporate companies, not political parties. Unleashing that power is quite significant, ladies and gentlemen, because it is powerful. My task is so simple this morning. The first one is to raise your blood pressure, then probably share a solution for you to consider, and then leave you with a way forward. Let's get into it. The evolution. It's not about the little bee with the sting in the back, but it's very similar. Broad or black economic empowerment came about as part of the transformational agenda. It focused primarily on ownership. Didn't work. Then we started with broad-based black economic empowerment. The focus moved subtly away from ownership to the point where you would need to consider how are you doing as an organization with the supporting of black-owned suppliers. Didn't work that well. So they moved along to amended BBBEE, and that's what we're sitting with at the moment. And I think my task today is going to quickly try and share with you some of the essentials that you need to have in your little toolbox to be able to make some very, very strategic decisions going forward. In the new scorecard, these three categories of companies or entities are so exceptionally important for you to understand and appreciate. Judging by the room, I'm assuming all of you are on the 50 million and above turnover per annum. Yay. Does this mean, Gavin, that there's less? Okay, cool. Because now, for the few that are at the top, guess what? You are going to need the support, the existence of the QSEs, which is the middle bracket that is above 10 million and below 50 million turnover, 51% or more black-owned, for you to stay competitive, for you to keep your contracts year on year. And more so, the little ones at the bottom, the under 10 million, 51% or more black-owned entities, are so significant to your competitiveness when it comes to competing for contracts with each other. The elements are not just ownership. The elements at the top, yes, ownership is one of them, but management control is a significant other. Management control, how many black people in your management structure from junior, middle, executive, board level, how many black people, and by the way, by black, just for understanding and definition, it is African, colored, Indian, and Chinese naturalized before 1994. Skills development. That's always been there, but there's been some changes. And I'll highlight that in a little while. By the way, with management control, fundamentally controlled by what we all know as the Employment Equity Act. And you'll notice that I'll start to refer to a number of acts quite often. I'm hoping to encourage us as a corporate world to not look for intermediaries to interpret the legislation that is sitting in our robust constitution. Let's get to do it ourselves so that it informs our strategic decisions directly without any mess. So, management control, employment equity is always there. Skills development, yes, again, two acts. Skills Development Act, Skills Levies Act. And then comes this little baby, enterprise and supply development. What's the difference? Very simple. We all understand what a supplier is. An enterprise? Well, It has to be a company that is not a supplier to you, but has the initial structure or the structure of at least being 51% or more black-owned within your procurement, well, not in your procurement database, but that is a company that you would support with your enterprise development. Now, that should get your pressure going because you already have to support your suppliers that are 51% or more black-owned. But we'll get to that slide just now. The last one is brilliant, socioeconomic development. Everybody confuses this with corporate social investment, which is the nice thing that you get tax rebates for, but it's not counted as part of your socioeconomic development spend. That element has a very fundamental definition to it, and is so important for the CFOs and the CEOs, obviously, to understand that when you literally give away, in cash or kind, a large percentage of your projected net profit after tax to this organization, that they actually use it to generate a revenue. Because if they don't, you don't get the points. This slide is pretty hectic, but it's only to share with you these columns between new and past. In the past, the gaps between the different levels, 1 to 8, on your BBBW scorecard used to be 15 points. Now, it's just 5. So you can't say no to any one of these points sitting on the scorecard simply because you couldn't afford to drop a level at all. Again, ownership, management control, skills development. Now, remember that thing I was telling you about, enterprise supply development and your projected net profit after tax? I love the screen. I can walk right up to it. Enterprise. Any organization that is 51% or more black-owned, you need to support it with 1% of your projected net profit after tax. Makes up that 4% that you have to plan for year on year. Suppliers, 2% of your projected net profit after tax, they must be 51% or more black-owned year on year. Already that's 3%, guys. How's the pressure? And the last one, add another 1% of your net profit after tax for socioeconomic development. Again, the recipient needs to be 51% or more black-owned. Now, this is a huge challenge. Every organization, in addition to everything else, has to start planning at a very executive level to stay competitive. Because once you get your rating from 1 to 8, that is what you are stuck with for 12 whole months to procure business and new contracts. And the risk is, if there's one organization that is one level higher than you, you could lose to that company. Ownership, I'm not going to talk about that. You decide how that goes forward. Management control, also not going to talk about that. You are going to be taking care of that quite comfortably. However, the next 3 are quite significant. Skills development, I'm not going to go into the detail, but in addition to your employed staff, you now have to worry about persons with disability, black people with disability, permanently employed in some scorecards, unemployed persons with disability, which is a proportion of your employed staff. You have to take care of that. And here's the real kicker. You get bonus points. Yay! If the unemployed people that you train get employed by the sector or yourself. This one's nice. To break it up, you've got preferential procurement right at the top. Look at the points. Then you've got supply development, enterprise development. Let's look at preferential procurement. Exempt micro-enterprises, you can start to see how these small companies become very important to you on the scorecard because they carry so much of points. They have to be black-owned, 51% or more. It's even better if they're 30% black woman-owned, and it's even better if they are 51% defined in the designated group, which is youth, veterans, rural, or persons with disabilities. You kind of get bonus points there too. I'm hoping you're starting to see BBBE since 2016 sincerely needs a CEO and a CFO and an executive commitment to understanding the principles to be able to capitalize on this, because it is quite significant. Supplier development, I've already shared. You've got to find those suppliers that are at least 51% or more black-owned in your procurement database for you to spend that 2% of net profit after tax in cash or kind to gain those points, or you lose competitiveness. Same with enterprise development. It's almost like a mantra that I'm singing now. It has to be 51% or more black-owned. And then the bonus points is brilliant, because now, if you move an enterprise, not a supplier to you, to a supplier to yourself, you get bonus points. And look at that, 2 points. And also if they create 1 or more jobs. These are all the subtleties that are so important to what I'm trying to get to by the end of this presentation. Are we still getting the pressure up there? The one that this is quite significant is socioeconomic development. Now please remember, the definition I'm sharing concisely is that 1% of your projected net profit after tax needs to go to an enterprise that is 51% or more black-owned, and they use that 1%, either cash or kind, to generate a revenue. So a simple way of explaining this would be, let's take Kali at the back there. He starts his own organization. He's a black guy. Maybe he has white partners. That's cool. And if you give him 1,000 rands or 100,000 rands, and he puts it in the bank, you will not get any points, because that money sits in the bank and gets him interest. However, if he buys a bakkie and does furniture removals on the weekend with that 100,000 rands, you now get full points because he's starting to generate a revenue of about 1,500 rands a month. Hopefully you understand that mechanism. I kind of wanted to drive the nail home, and I think I've succeeded. Everybody's silent or fast asleep, but I like hitting that thing in, because you got to understand the situation. It sounds terrible. But let's look at the solutions. I put it to you. Sound like a lawyer. I put it to you. You, the transport sector, will benefit from the creation of transport hubs, community hubs, and intermodal hubs. There's been a lot of talk on various forums that are so relevant to your sector that the ultimate would be intermodal hubs. Why? For safety, efficiency, socioeconomic growth, for drivers, vehicles, and clients' cargo, and the communities through which you drive through. Can I just get some sort of response? Do you think that's possible? Do you need that? Yeah? No? Everybody's not moving. So it's a bit scary, but you'll start to see it's kind of achievable, guys. I know, I told you, I'm trying to put a solution down. I've been working with corporate clients for the last 30 years, various levels on all of those, measured entities, EMEs, QSEs, you name it. In the initial stages, it was with employment equity. And every time we had to come up with solutions that made sense to you as the business sector. Not the hard case, not interested in that, a business case. And a business case is, how do I make this work so that it brings back value? I don't mind spending the money because I have to comply. There's no choice there. But show me how I get value back. Employment equity, skills development, and now the BBBEE. It's been an absolute privilege working with these lovely clients that are forward-thinking and allow for latitude of innovation, because they've succeeded and they are still successful today. What it has allowed me, the opportunity is, to not only work with the business sector at all levels, but to work with my communities all around South Africa at every single level. Urban, rural, deep rural, persons with disability. What an education. Story time. Once upon a time, there was this little organization started in 2003, doing work all over a lovely land that you all are pretty familiar with called South Africa. And in a province you might be familiar with, KwaZulu-Natal. And when we were doing projects in Sisluwe, we recognized that the Durban to Mozambican corridor was not being optimized for two stakeholders. Firstly, the truckers. Back in 2014, there was just one Total Bonjour, just before Schlischluhe. And you know, when I used to take my team out, they were predominantly ladies at the time, and they needed to pee. When they saw the stop, the only thing they said was not Total, it was bonjour, bonjour. Off the ladies went. It was lovely, it was a lovely stop. Now, the vehicles we traveled in were much faster, and they got there much quicker. Your poor truckers, okay, they could use the bush on the side of the road, but sincerely, that is not the idea. So, we approached, by the way, that was the problem for the truckers. The community was not benefiting in any way from the interaction with these truckers going by. And believe me, you understand, with the informal economy, that is a potential loss, massive loss for the community. So we approached Chief Mdletshe in the area, and we were allocated a massive stretch of land. We were then asked at his request to speak to his people. He gathered everybody with all the indunas in the area, and we spoke to them. We did a skills audit. We were ready to go. All that we needed was funding back in 2014 to start the first truck stop back then. Unfortunately, TITA, who was the only funding opportunity we had back then, had a mandate that said we do not support infrastructural development, even though they use your subscriptions. So that was a failure. Then forward quickly to 2017. Beaufort West, and you know Beaufort West was a pretty hectic node. And we did a couple of projects in the area, in the surrounding areas for unemployed youth, persons with disabilities, and we noted the volumes of trucks going through that area. So this is what we did. We went a step further with this one. We did a full-on presentation to full council at Beaufort West Municipality. This is what we proposed, a rest stop. This time, it was designed to be everything in addition to being a truck stop. For tourists, for locals, for transit, for you name it. We would have filling stations for all vehicles, a rest stop that was paved, not a dust bowl, well lit, beautiful ablution facilities, secure, obviously, truck servicing and repair. We spoke to a couple of the manufacturers. They were willing to train the local community, diesel mechanics to become diesel technicians, to be able to do OEM servicing, a shopping center, showground area, exhibition area, manufacturing, accommodation, all of that. Here's the kicker. We had some provisos. This little bit is exceptionally important, and it's exceptionally important for you to understand today. The idea for development, one of the modeling, is that you use cooperatives, community-based cooperatives. Skills exist in that community. And the other fundamental aspect is a cooperative, for it to be a continued beneficiary of grant funding from everybody, needs to be 75% black and 25% white. A cooperative can receive grant funding year on year as long as they are 75% black, 25% white. It has been that way since 2016. Obviously, in addition to all of this, what we did was we tried to put this formula together to give our donors maximum benefit back. So, you remember that preferential procurement I was talking about? You can start to see the structure of the co-op fits in directly with that. So if you engage, or if you consider that to be funding, that initiative, that cooperative, you get all of these points back. Because initially, let me just go back. Are we comfortable with 75%, 25% white? Because I find that wherever I go, nobody mentions that. Everybody thinks broad-based black economic empowerment is purely for black and white are excluded. It's not. It would be ideal if the structure was 75% black, 51% black youth, 30% black women, obviously or 25% white, and then 2% with disability. So all the EMEs and the QSEs in the room, you might not be a cooperative, but if you can get your structures right, maybe the big boys would consider you for support, grant support. Sorry, Neo, not bank loans. This is just grants, year on year. And that's 4% of net profit after tax, year on year, that the big boys have to spend to be compliant, that could contribute back to the growth of the sector. Just saying. By the way, with the socioeconomic development project, we also shared no family or friends of civil servants or politicians will be allowed in the formation of the initial cooperatives. I'm not going to explain that further. No franchise brands would be allowed on the sites, no brick and mortar buildings, only repurposed shipping containers converted to the highest quality available, absolutely no cost from training of individuals through to formation of co-ops, through to the equipping of the co-ops. No cost. The guys are going to play the second slideshow on both those slides for you to just get the idea that the quality of the shipping containers are not the Sparza type. This is high-end, quality shipping container conversions that are currently being used 10, 12 years already in the rest of the world. I'm going past this. The Beaufort West project fundamentally allowed for us to be able to create cooperatives almost instantly on bakeries, restaurants, overnight accommodation, diesel truck repairs, gardeners, security, obviously fish farming, poultry, hydroponics, and that gets extended to the community. But think of the opportunity for employment. That's what we were all talking about. The previous speakers are saying, what can we do to create employment? We're looking for the election results. This has been in our hands since 2016, and we can act on it. But what's the benefit for us as a business? Safety, security, and support. Well, this was for Beaufort West, remember. It's the same thing. And just to share, what helped us with our committed funders back then was, as the truck drives into the rest stop with a swipe of a card, $100 gets paid to a black-owned entity that takes care of the co-ops. Go to a converted container with a 3x3 cube, with a proper washing room, with a vanity counter and a dry area for a driver to actually do his business in dignity. If he needs a restaurant, and we're not talking brands here, we're talking about local cuisine that is prepared by the local co-op, all of these people become EME suppliers to you, the operator, in helping you with your competitiveness and your compliance. Obviously, there's opportunities with the conversion of the containers. We're looking at panel beating, spray painting, welding. All these lovely skills could be uplifted in a decentralized way. But this was just for Beaufort West, I'm just reminding you. That's full council approval to get this project off the ground in 2017. So we succeeded to get to that point. And I did that with full council meeting with CARDF, Karoo Development Front, ANC, DA, and all the other smaller splinter parties with full community participation. There's the letter. They asked again in 2018. And then things went quiet. In addition to the rest stop, we proposed community hubs. It's so important for you to understand, and I think a lot of the speakers are saying this. You cannot look at any initiative in isolation. And if you look at the transport sector or the transport hub, it needs support from the community. And for the community to be able to give that support timeously, you need to consider community hubs, senior citizens, ECD creches to take place, to take care of the children, school aftercare, extra lessons, bakery, superette, restaurant. A manufacturing hub to do extra trade work. And obviously a farming hub to all the greens that are needed on the burgers. That was delayed due to political bureaucracy and unfortunately didn't take off. And in that time, a lot of our funders that were prepared to commit to the project decided, with all the risks and the crime that was happening in the area, they weren't interested. So, rack that up as number 2 for me, not being able to get a socioeconomic development off the ground. But now here I am in front of you today, learning lessons from Shishlue, learning lessons from Beaufort West, and saying to you, how about a national project? Similar principles, all around the country, with all these freight routes, every 150 to 200 kilometers. My team has already been in consultation with all those potential municipalities. Can we do this? How do we do this? Identify sites with you. We've got the grid. We've made the initial outreach. How does that fit into your business, should you decide to come on board? Then we would be able to establish primary services almost immediately. Bakeries, washrooms, come on, those are simple things to do. Then you can expand to a full intermodal hub. Where does the money come from? There you go. Your skills development spend could be used to train unemployed individuals in these communities in the initial stages. Your enterprise and supply development spend would go then towards the training of cooperatives. And look at the benefit you get back in the points. And not to mention socioeconomic development. If you have these co-ops going, you don't have to think or fandango some way of spending that 1% of your projected net profit after tax. It goes back into a solution that brings extreme value back to your sector. By the way, these are the only icons and GIFs I could find on the internet, so I didn't get diesel max and diesel technicians and that. So bear with me, it's just about the principles, okay? Just so that you can open your mind up to the idea that it's possible. All of the spend can go into co-op development all around the country and bringing extreme value back to your business. Is this thing going to be onerous, difficult, and burdensome? Oops. Let's look at it. Funding. It is so important for you to understand that you are not the only sector that's in a situation where you are obligated to support rural development initiatives. Except, I beg to ask you, have you ever heard of socioeconomic development projects of the scale that we are proposing here today? For you to consider as the transport sector to contribute to that, that would be great, but you're not alone. We've already approached the other sectors that also have on their scorecard the need for them to spend this grant funding year on year on community development projects. The construction sector, for example, specific in their scorecard. The forestry sector, and here's the biggie, mining sector social labor plans. What a huge amount of money. They are not being spent in the right places simply because of inefficient LED, meaning local economic development plans from your municipalities. All of those funding can be directed to a significantly credible project of development that supports not only the sector, but the communities in which we work in. Land. We've experienced this with the municipalities we've dealt with. They have lots of land available, close to the national routes. All we are needing to do is make sure that our projects are rated priority 1 on their local economic development strategy. Done. People, there are so many people out there skilled. And if you start to remember what I said, 75% black, 25% white, your money can be put to good use by establishing such customized cooperatives, not just for your sector, but for development in general. I lead a group of companies called the Olympus Group, and we have worked since 2003, not only having the credentials, but now have the experience to be able to implement this on your behalf at no cost to you. No extra cost to you. There's no consultancy fees. There's no added hidden costs. It's basically you helping us achieve what we are designed to do. How does this make sense to us? We are an accredited skills development organization. We are also consulting services. But this last bit is of significant note to you. When we talk about the codes of good practice that lead the BBBEE, they talk about enterprise and supplier development units and socioeconomic development units. It basically means a third party that is suitably qualified, like us. If we provide and take over this burdensome obligation from you, we are allowed to extract from that 4% of projected net profit after tax a maximum of 15% to fund ourselves. So it's at no cost to you on the balance sheet. You're paying that 4% anyway, whether you're doing it on this project or whichever other way you wish to get your compliance. But what I'm putting on the table is no added cost to you. Kind of time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes left. You decide on the way forward. I think it's important for you to understand. I'm trying to do a lot in a few minutes that I had. Do you understand how much of power you have in your decision of spending your BBBEE spends? You decide, you currently decide who, what, when, where, and why you spend those fees. Gavin mentioned earlier on, he's keeping the Charter Council at bay. They usually come on board when transformation hasn't really happened according to whatever milestones they envisage. But you could well understand, if we get traction on this, we're creating employment, we're moving on the transformation agenda, there's no need to change the control of your BBBEE spend. There isn't. There's no grounds for it. You can make this a reality. I sound like a politician. The money goes directly from you to a cooperative recipient. We will tell you who and when. Value to you, automatically around the country on every one of these rest stops, as your rigs go through these transport hubs, you accrue suppliers that are EME. And that's going to make you competitive. In addition, apart from everything else, lower insurance premiums because of the safety and that, we increase the safety for our drivers and maybe start to include women drivers if we have the infrastructure in the country the way we hope it will be. Not to mention the potential for us to start having EV charging units every 100, 200 kilometers. I know there are KDG down in Durban is already using electric trucks for the short hauls from PMB to the harbor. Intermodal hubs cannot be achieved overnight. We have to start somewhere. And everybody is saying that we are waiting for somebody else. And since 2016, we've had this in our hands. How do we get progressively to there without feeling any pain or pinch? Because we certainly have discovered in recent times we can't rely on anybody else. It's doable, but we've got to take the first steps. And I quite honestly believe the first step would be the transport hubs, followed by the community hubs, then your intermodal hubs. Oops. It's time for you to decide. I'm hoping it was helpful. I know I went quite quickly. I trust you understand the essence and the potential and the opportunity. For questions, as much as you've got all the other opportunities, please snap this code. Let's start talking. We are most willing. Let's give it till Monday when we can start responding to all your requests and intimate questions that you wish to have. And I think that's about it.